For centuries, humanity has wrestled with a single haunting question: what did Jesus truly look like? We know his words. We know his miracles. We know the love that poured out of him for the poor, the broken, the forgotten. But when it comes to his face, his features, his presence, history leaves us almost in silence. The Bible tells us who he was, not how he appeared. It was never meant to be a book of portraits. It was a book of salvation. And yet, buried deep in the shadows of history, every so often, something surfaces, a fragment, a whisper, a testimony from someone who claimed to have seen him with their own eyes. And one of those whispers is unlike anything else. A letter tied to none other than Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who presided over the trial of Jesus, the man who questioned him, and the man who ultimately handed him over to be crucified. Imagine it. The most unlikely witness of all, leaving behind words that describe not just the presence of Jesus, but his very face, his hair, his skin, even the sound of his voice. If this is true, then we may be staring at one of the closest earthly descriptions of Jesus Christ ever recorded. But the question lingers: was it really written by Pilate? And if so, why was it hidden for so long? Before we explore this story, let me invite you to join our journey. Subscribe to this channel, because here we uncover ancient testimonies, lost writings, and biblical discoveries that shine light on both history and faith. Now imagine the scene. Pilate, a Roman governor hardened by politics and bloodshed, used to dealing with rebels, criminals, men who begged for mercy at his feet. Yet standing before him was someone entirely different. Jesus did not plead. He did not tremble. He stood in calm silence. Pilate was shaken by this man. In the Gospel of John, we read how Pilate asked, "What is truth?" A question born not of curiosity, but of being unsettled by the presence before him. He declared to the crowds, "I find no fault in him." Something about Jesus pierced through Pilate's armor. So, could it be possible that Pilate, or at least someone close to his court, left behind a written description of the man who had disturbed him so deeply? Through the ages, writings have surfaced that claim to do just that. Some scholars call it the letter of Lentulus. Others have credited Pilate himself. Its origin may be debated, but its words remain haunting. They tell of a man whose appearance carried both simplicity and majesty, whose eyes held the kind of depth that no brush or chisel could ever capture. The letter describes him with hair like ripe chestnut, falling in gentle waves, a face without wrinkle or blemish, glowing with a healthy hue, a beard, full but not long, parted at the chin, eyes bright and changeable, compared to the morning star itself, a voice soft and plain, yet unlike any other, modest in his behavior, wise in his words, admired by those who heard him. It almost reads like poetry. But if true, these are not just lines of verse. They are the memory of someone who encountered him, someone trying desperately to capture in words what it was like to stand in the presence of Jesus. One of the most striking details is his complexion. The description suggests a warm, sun-kissed tone, a man of the Middle East, not the pale, almost porcelain figure that medieval painting so often presented. This aligns with what we know of his birthplace, Bethlehem, Nazareth, regions of rugged land and sun, where people carried darker features, where skin bore the touch of the earth. The Bible itself gives us hints. In Isaiah's prophecy, it is written that he had no beauty or majesty that would attract people to him, no appearance that would make him desirable by earthly standards. He was not a king draped in gold, nor a man who turned heads because of status or glamour, yet those who looked at him were moved not because of outward appearance, but because of the weight of his presence. And then there are his eyes. The letter's words linger here, bright and changeable, like the morning star. Anyone who has read the Gospels knows how often people were struck by a simple look from Jesus. When he looked at the rich young ruler, Scripture says he loved him. When Peter denied him, one glance was enough to break his heart and bring him to tears. His gaze carried both truth and love, conviction and compassion. Imagine Pilate, standing in judgment, staring into those eyes. How could anyone walk away unchanged? His voice, too, is described as gentle, sweet, plain, the kind of voice that could calm storms, cast out fear, and yet still carry authority. He once said, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." Those who heard him speak knew there was something otherworldly about it. His words didn't thunder to impress, but they cut to the soul with simplicity and power. The letter goes further. noting how he carried himself with humility, how his words drew admiration. And that, too, mirrors what Scripture says. Crowds marveled at him not only because he healed the sick or fed the hungry, but because he spoke with authority unlike any other. He didn't shout for attention, he didn't strive for recognition, yet people listened, hearts stirred simply by the way he spoke. Even Pilate's wife felt it. Scripture tells us she was disturbed by dreams of Jesus and warned her husband to leave him alone. That is not the reaction of someone insignificant. It is the echo of someone whose presence reached into hearts, even in silence. So why, then, has this letter been hidden from public knowledge for so long? The answer may lie in history. During times of war, persecution, and upheaval, countless manuscripts were lost, destroyed, or hidden away. Some ended up locked in private collections, others sealed in monasteries or the guarded halls of the Vatican. Many writings about Jesus never made it into the biblical canon because they weren't divinely inspired scripture, but that doesn't strip them of historical value. They offer glimpses into how others saw him, and that's where this becomes powerful. Because at the end of the day, our faith isn't about what Jesus looked like, it's about who he is. But still, there's something deeply moving about remembering he was real. He wasn't just a story passed down through time, he wasn't a myth or a legend. He was flesh and blood. He walked the same ground we walk. He knew hunger, thirst, laughter, pain. His eyes held love. His voice carried peace. His hands touched the sick. His feet carried him to the cross, and his body rose again. That's the miracle. That's the gospel. That's why it matters. Because when we hear these ancient descriptions, whether from Pilate or another hand, they remind us of something we often forget. Jesus wasn't distant. He was here. He lived among us. People saw him, remembered him, wrote about him, and through it all, one truth shines. He came not to be admired for his features, but to save the world. And maybe that's why this letter, even with all its debates, stirs so many hearts, because it pulls us closer to the reality of Jesus. It makes us imagine his voice in our ears, his eyes looking into ours, his presence filling the room. It reminds us that he is not just a figure of history, but the living Son of God who still sees us, still speaks, still loves. So if you find yourself feeling distant from God, remember this. The same Jesus who stood calmly before Pilate, unshaken by power, is the same Jesus who stands with you right now. His love is unchanged. His presence is near. His eyes are still filled with truth. His voice still calls out to those willing to listen. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the mysteries of faith and history. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more discoveries, testimonies, and forgotten stories that bring the pages of Scripture to life. Until next time, may the peace of Christ be with you.